hi, and welcome back to Pest Prospectives. It's our visit with the experts, the pros, the Pest Pros of Michigan. Today, we're talking a little bit about something that you might think is a little creepy, or maybe a lot creepy. Bats. We're going to talk about bats today with Chris Luteyn, who's a wildlife specialist among the Pest Pros of Michigan. Hi, Chris.
Hi there. How you
You're
doing?
fearless when it comes to bats, right?
Yeah, but I like bats, so I love them.
Well, that probably helps for someone in your position, I presume.
Yeah, and I like to educate people and teach them about bats while I'm helping them get the bats out of their house. I'd like to bring in talking about how they play a huge part in agriculture, spread seeds, pollinate. They eat 6,000 insects nightly.
That's a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And they save us over $1 billion in revenue when it comes to pesticides and crops every year.
All right, let's talk about all of that because we do want to know if you have bats in your attic, let's say, we do want to know how you'll approach getting rid of them. But let's learn about this first. Bats are actually helpful, and they do some of these things you're talking about. So they actually pollinate?
Yeah, absolutely. They travel all over the place and they're eating bugs left and right. They come out every night to get water and they'll eat fruits and other things like that. They'll land on flowers, pollinate. They get pollen. They do a lot of things bees do, actually.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking that too. They
Yeah.
act like bees in some ways, but they operate mostly at night. Is that right?
Yeah, they are nocturnal. So they
Yeah.
come out every night. They're either preparing for breeding. And when they're preparing for breeding, all they're doing is eating insects and coming out every night to drink water. And they do the same thing when they're getting ready for hibernation to store up fat so they can live in somebody's attic for the whole year, the whole winter season, I mean.
Yeah. So when they are active nocturnally at night, they're doing these things, but they also can pose a hazard for humans. Is that true?
Absolutely. Now, everybody thinks rabies when they think bats, but every animal can get rabies. You know what I mean? When it comes to bats, it's more comes down to their droppings and the nastiness that they leave in your walls, your attic, and places like that. And that's when people can get histoplasmosis and leptospirosis. I have a hard time saying that one. It's almost, you can get the same stuff from bird droppings as well. But bat droppings can really pile up in your attic, and before you know it, it's eating through your drywall, or it's, you got a 2-foot pile of bat droppings roosting. And that could affect somebody who has a lowered immune system, elderly, children, stuff like that. Especially if you're getting them in your house and you don't know they're in your house and they're getting in your bed on accident and biting you and you don't know it.
Yeah. Does it get that far?
Yeah, I've had one customer had so many bats. She bought a house, didn't know she had so many bats in the house when she bought it. She went to bed and thought her cat was scratching her, and a bat bit her 7 times while she was sleeping. And luckily, somebody from her job noticed that it was bat bites because her son got bat bites and told her she better go get rabies shots, and that's what she had to do.
Wow. So when they bite us, what do they think? That we're a flower?
No, the only way they pollinate really is that they're landing on everything and picking up pollen. You know what I mean? Now, when they're biting you, it's usually because somebody's handling them, or they're in your bed, or they're in your shoe, or they've gotten into your house and they've landed somewhere because they're either depleted, tired, don't know where they're at, discombobulated. A younger juvenile bat that doesn't really know its way around and it's just kind of running off instinct, gets lost in the house, ends up in your bed, crawling somewhere wherever it can get, and then you end up coming in contact with it. So it's always a good idea if you do have children in a room and a bat was in the room with them, or an elderly person or something like that, somebody who isn't really aware of everything all the time, you really got to pay attention to that. They got pinpoint teeth and if they bite you sometimes, you don't even know it. They could scrape you and you think you scraped your hand on something else,
I've seen video or portrayals, at least, of bats in attics, and they bring 2 friends and so on, as the old commercial goes. So there's really something like a colony up there, right?
Absolutely. Well, there's one bat, there's usually a couple bats. It could be from anywhere from 10 bats to 300 bats.
Oh my.
I've opened up attics where you can't even get into the attic because the bats are soaring all over and they're everywhere and it's just filled with guano. So that's when you have to get all that guano and the bats out of there.
Yeah. So how does a person become aware typically that there's a bat in the attic or several of them? Do they make noise? I mean, short of them coming in and biting you, is there some way that folks generally discover that they're there?
Usually it's a noise or they end up with them getting in their house. They've come into the living area at least 2, 3 times and they're sick of it. Stuff like that. It's usually because they're following airflow. They got lost, and it's usually a juvenile bat who ends up coming down. It's usually when they got a maternity colony up there and they end up with a juvenile coming down, or a bat gets lost, follows airflow because they got sensors on their nose that lets them know where they're going. And if they got AC unit pumping through or heat or something and they're getting lost or something like that, and they want to get deeper and deeper and it's colder and colder out, that's when they end up inside. And that's when we end up called to jump into the attic and find out exactly what's going on.
So I want to hear about that, but I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. Let's say you get the call, all right? Somebody says, I have bats. How do you handle it?
Well, first, I kind of try to educate them so they're not too scared or freaked out of it, because bats are they're creepy to people. So I ensure them that bats are pretty docile and scared of you, if anything. So then I kind of go into that. I find out exactly how long they've been hearing anything, how long they've been dealing with anything, how many times they've seen bats in their house. And then it starts with the evaluation. But I kind of talk to them and educate them on the bats so they can understand what they're dealing with.
And then I presume you've got to stake out the situation.
Absolutely. That's when you get busy. And I use all their information. I take in everything they said, but then it turns into what I already know. So then I go after the house. You want to start in that attic. You want to find all the droppings in that attic, and you want to really scour through that attic and find anything else that they might have going on. It's not just all about bats, But I find out where the guano is, how many bats. I have to estimate usually on how many bats are in there, judging by guano, displacement of guano, the roosting piles, because a lot of times the guano is just through the attic, But then you start finding those big roosting piles, and that will let you know how many bats are in there. And then that's when you have to get out there on the roof, scour over the entire roof, scour the entire roof line, look over every nook, cranny, every roof junction, ridge vent, gable vents, underneath the drip edges where the rake boards are, everything. You got to make sure there's no sneaky ways that they're getting in. And you got to check out all of that. And then that's when you come up with your plan.
By the way, guano is bat dropping, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We could talk about guano for a minute. Now, that's the most dangerous thing about bats is the guano. And when you clean it up, you have to be very cautious about it. Like I suggest pre-soaking it with a sanitizer or something, just kind of mist it and then suck it up that way. You don't want to blow it all over the place. You want to contain it.
All right. So you're going to assess the situation by seeing what's there, and you're also going to determine where they're getting in. This is important because this could be an entry point for other things. You alluded a moment ago to the notion there could be other stuff going on in an attic. So if there is an entry point that is welcoming enough, there could be something else there too, which I guess points to the idea that bats can coexist with other things.
Oh, yeah. Usually the attic has some mice in there and some squirrels. Usually if I get called to a noise in an attic, there's usually a couple things going on.
Okay.
But the bat's the most important thing at that time. And then I let them know about everything else. And we address that as well. But those bats got to get out of there.
So how do you do that? How do you evict them?
All right. So after we find all the entry points, the easiest part about evicting bats is relying on their behavioral patterns. Once you understand a bat and that they have to come out and eat every night, they have to come out and get these 6,000, 8,000 insects every night and get their water. All you got to do is show them the way out. And we make valves and everything that are safe for them. And we do it all in a safe way for the bat and a safe way for the customer. When I train people and everything, I recommend don't use a lot of foams and stuff like that because we don't want the bats getting stuck in them. We want to use metals and products that would allow the bat to move in its natural form of coming in and out, get out and not get stuck in anything that we're doing, get blocked in, get locked in, everything like that. So the easiest part is showing them out, finding those ways, corralling them right out of those roof junctions or vent or gable vent, wherever, ridge vent if need be. But the hardest part is making sure that whole roof is sealed because they are very tenacious and they will fly around that house for a good month or two looking for a way in.
Oh, boy.
They won't stop until they're forced to move on, until they can't get in. And sometimes it's a battle. Sometimes you got to come back a couple of times and battle bats.
Okay. So if I've understood you, you're saying that you're creating an inviting way for them to leave, but then not be able to get back in. That sounds complicated.
Yep. You got to evict them and lock them out, just like a squatter.
Right.
Okay.
So you create this exit point, but how do they not get back in through that?
Well, we use one-way valves that either I make a door for, so when they slide right on out, the door shuts behind them, or
Hmm.
you got to angle a valve a certain way and have valves set up a certain way that physics won't allow them to shoot in. Now, this is the thing. Bats aren't like birds and other aerial creatures. They're the only flying mammal. They're almost like mice. They can't crawl on vinyl. They're not going to crawl all over slippery stuff, siding, aluminum, soffits, all of that stuff. They can't really crawl on that. They got to be able to land on the roof, crawl on those shingles, and find those ways into those roof junctions where the soffit meets with the shingles.
Sure.
Or they got to find like old historic homes that are wood soffits still, stuff like that. Then they can really get in. They can crawl right under the drip edge. They can crawl into all those areas. They got to be able to land on brick or something like that so they can creep in. They're not big on just soaring into places like birds,
Okay. So you've understood where the entry points could be. You've closed those and you've created an inviting exit. The door shuts behind them and it's done. Except
Absolutely. Yep.
they may be trying to get back in for a while.
Yep. They'll come pouring out of there. Customers always told me I'll tell them come out at a certain time. You can watch them pour out of those valves. And that's the first thing they told me. They watched like 20 bats come out of one valve throughout the, couple hours. They'll just continue to fall out of there and take off. Then they'll come right back around, try to go back to it, realize they can't get in, go around the house and look for another way in.
Okay. They're going to be somewhat fastidious about trying to get back in.
Oh, yeah.
You've done the part that keeps them out, which is to find those entry points and close them up, and that should do the job. You've said, though, that sometimes they work at it and they come back again.
Yep. Now, this is the thing. It is a process sometimes, especially when you're working on big old historic homes. You know how those are.
Yeah.
They got a lot of wood, a lot of little nooks and crannies. Some of them are brick all the way up to the soffit at the top. So it's a lot of ladder work. Sometimes we have to get lifts involved, stuff like that. But sometimes they get back in and sometimes it's a process of dealing. But then you can really zero in. Say one gets back in, it's not always a bad thing because then you know that there's something else still going on that you have to address. And then that's when you go and find that real hidden spot,
Right. So Is there a protocol then if you've had bats? There's probably the need for a pest pro to come and check it out periodically, right?
Yes. Now we do offer warranty renewals where we come every year, we check out everything, and we keep a renewal warranty on everything in case they do have problems. We can come and address it. We also recommend like cleaning out their attic, getting rid of the guano, sanitizing, because that attracts every pest. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah, they like it.
They pick up the scent. Yeah. All right. Wow. An incredible animal and obviously a very clear protocol about handling them. And of course, if you've been bitten, that's a medical situation. So you'll want to proceed accordingly. But
Absolutely.
I think, and we've learned this in several episodes now, something that folks may not realize is that all of you are trained and ready to handle the, I guess I'll call it repair of whatever the entry point is for many of these pests we've talked about. And you handle that too, which is reassuring.
Absolutely. Background in construction plays a huge part in this. I did construction for 20 years on homes, buildings, different stuff. I'm a jack of all trades. So when I got here and we realized we were going to go in that wildlife direction, I was like, I'm going to jump in all over that. Let's go after these bats. Let's go after everything. And then we started a whole wildlife division. Now we got other people doing it, and it's awesome.
Well, look, Chris, I'm going to go out on a limb and speak for a bunch of people and say, we're glad you do.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I'm glad I do too. It's something so new to me. And in the past 5 years, I've learned so much and thrown myself into this. And I love helping people with bats. And I love being able to help bats in a way too. So they're still, they're not just getting taken care of wrong, locked in a house, sealed in a house, killed. There are companies who I've come across who are doing some really bad stuff.
Yeah, this is a little more humane, showing them the way out and resolving the problem. If you have a bat issue, Chris Luteyn and the folks at the Pest Pros of Michigan are ready to help. Chris, thanks for walking us down the path of how you handle this.
Absolutely, Richard. Thank you for having me on here.
Look for the Pest PROSpectives podcast and subscribe where you get podcasts.